And again, I know you did that before. You did some of this already, right? Trying to share that information with the community. But that next step is asking the community, what do you think? And ideally, you would do a mail survey and a phone poll. But you don't have enough voters to do a scientific phone poll. You could do it, but there'd be so few people that would respond to it that the margin of error would be huge. And so what we recommend is simply a mail survey. It's not scientific, but it provides a general undertone of the electorate, and you're going to know whether you have a chance or not. Norwich 80 went through this. Norwich 80 got results back. It said 58% would not support Plan A, Plan B, or Plan C. 58%. Yet they still went with Plan C, I think it was, which was one school, $60 million, and they got hammered. Okay? So part of this process is also respecting that taxpayer and listening. Okay? So those results come back, and truly respecting that taxpayer, listening to what they said. Yes?
Are you responsible for the 207 mailer?
Yes.
Because that was excellent.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So we take the mail survey results, and you're also doing your public meetings, outreach meetings, gathering as much information as we can from the taxpayer, and then we go to the citizen task force and share the results with them. And say, okay, here's what the mail survey said, and here's what they said at the community outreach meetings, at the public meetings. And then they make a recommendation to the superintendent. Now, they could make a recommendation to the board, but all those task force meetings would have to be public meetings. So you could either way, but just know that they have to be public meetings. So anybody could attend, you'd have to have time allotted for public comment, etc. And then after that, the voters out there now, they're saying, well, I filled out this mail survey and I went to these meetings, now what? Well, then you do a follow-up letter and share with the entire district where you're headed. Here's kind of the results of the mail survey, here's what we're thinking, there's no decision yet, but you get that mailer out the door. And eventually, if you decide to put something on the ballot, then we go into campaign mode. When we say we, a group of concerned citizens, come together to advocate. And I don't leave. I'm here to help that group if they want help, and it's pro bono, that part. So we charge a fee for phases 1 through 3. Phase 4 is pro bono. So my same team of writers, graphic designers, database people, me, help with the campaign. If they want it. Sometimes they say, oh no, we got to handle it, right? It usually doesn't work very well when they say they got to handle, but it is what it is. So the bottom right is a sampling of clients that we've worked with. And I think, one thing I would mention is that they weren't squeakers. Like the Des Plaines Library District passed 52%. LaSalle Crew passed 50.5% or something. But look at the rest, 67%, 62%, 62%, 64, 70, 70, 65, 75, 63, 71. These aren't passing by a few votes, these are passing handily, and they're passing handily because we're involving the taxpayer in the planning process. We know in advance, prior to putting anything on the ballot, if it has a chance or not. And if it doesn't, then we have to modify the package to make it work. The other handout is just a quick voter analysis. And again, like literally a day with this data, so I haven't had a chance to really digest it. But the first thing I noticed is that, so if you look, it says registered voters. Here's 3,576. And it has, percentage male, female, age breakout, length of registration, party affiliation, etc. And 2018 primary, what we see is 43% of the voters who showed up were between 18 and 54. The rest were 55 and older. And so I start looking, well, how does that compare to, say, like a presidential? Well, it's identical. And then we look at the 2016 primary, and it was a little bit lower. And to me, it's surprising, because usually in a presidential election, that older, fiscally conservative voter is showing up, but it's oftentimes diluted by a younger voter base that shows up as well. But here, it's just kind of consistent. It's always this kind of older voter base showing up, and it's, there's some young people showing up, but it's not radically different. It's just kind of from election to election to election. So it's like, I rarely ever see that. The other thing is I look at, is I try to look at what percentage of Democrats are showing up. And I look at that because Democrats, when we do polling, are typically more supportive of tax measures for education. And so in this 2018 primary, 59% reported as Democrats. In the 2016 general, 50% Democrats. In the 2016 primary, 64% Democrats. So when you're trying to pass a tax, I would like Democrats to show up, I'd like parents to show up, and I'd like females 18 to 54 to show up. Okay? But as I look at this, I'm like, well, the next two best times to be on the ballot will be both the 2012 primary and the 2020 primary and the 2020 presidential. And why is that? Well, it's called the Trump effect. Okay? I know I'm on video, and I apologize to any of those who are upset about it. But here's the reality. The more that Donald does, the more that Democrats get upset, the more that females get upset, and the more that younger voters get upset, it works to your advantage. It works to school districts' advantage when they're trying to pass a tax, because they are going to show up in force. Democrats are going to show up in force, females are going to show up in force, and females 18 to 54 especially are going to show up in force. At both the primary 2020 and the general. So you can pick either one. You say, well, we think we want to go, I say fine. Either one is going to be better than what you've seen in the past. These next two elections coming up. And again, it's this Trump effect. Are there really just 4 phases? It sounds easy. Well, on this handout, okay, and I appreciate your amazing blue colors that the school district has selected. There's actually about 42 main things that you have to tackle. And we're there throughout the whole process, but it's super detailed. And one of the first things is trying to figure out what is this plan A that you want to bring to the task force, and that's that third item. And they have that little kind of carrot facing to the left. It's because that's going to happen like starting now, right? There's going to, as far as planning, I think you kind of wait until after this upcoming election and let the dust settle from that. But then if you've got to really put it into high gear, if you're thinking about an election for the primary in 2020. Now, if you're thinking for November 2020, you can stretch this out a bit. But I laid this out just, this is what it would look like if you're thinking about a primary 2020. The yellow, again, can be paid for by the district. The blue is the campaign paid for by a group of concerned citizens. Campaign committee. And then the other stuff is just my resume, list of services. As far as our fees, they've ranged from 35 to 75. Main 207, my fee is 75 grand because I know there's a lot of hand-holding and a ton of work. Same with your trip. Are you 75 grand? I don't know. I would send you a big list of all the stuff that we do. You can say,
okay, we don't know.
Small districts, they like their eyes roll back in their head like, oh my God, 75 grand, right? So I understand that. Okay, you're not New Trier, you're not Main 207. So I respect that. But at the same time, it's a ton of work if you do it right. And so the biggest thing would be, do you want me to facilitate the 4 task force meetings? If you didn't, then my fee goes down, not substantially, but definitely goes down. But if you want me to facilitate those 4 meetings, then it's not 75, but we would talk about it. I send you my list of all the services and have you figure out what you want.
I have a question. When it comes to what has passed, that's a nice list.
Yep.
The list that hasn't passed is also a good list.
Absolutely. St. Charles Library.
So my question is this though, in the data generation portion of it, all this can be tied back to the tax rate, socioeconomics, all that kind of things. So have you guys ever looked at, is there a gap where you have a passing percentage or not in terms of increase? Meaning to say, when you look at 207, just the percentage increase on my tax bill being part of that district, percentage increase for ours, I mean, I would vote for both of them, but that I can't. So, however, the percentage increase is different. So if you guys ever compared the percentage increase to the tax rate and the tax rate height, in terms of the average income, average property tax rate, because we're not just one suburb, we're split. So I'm curious to know, there is gonna be, I think if you ran those numbers, there'd be a ceiling. At which point it won't pass, because there's gonna be a ceiling where people just can't physically afford it.
Right.
So what is that ceiling in terms of percentage increase compared to tax rates, compared to an income status? And at some point, you're gonna, like I said, you'll hit that ceiling, and maybe ours was at that ceiling when you run the data, maybe not. So that goes back to your comments in terms of what they're willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
But I was curious to know if you guys have ever A, done it, and B, have you ever shared that? Because that is also, it would be an internal thing for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's a great
increase your success rate, because then you can also recommend, by running it behind the scene, here is the ceiling, this is why we're successful, this is why this guy's not.
I think there's, we haven't done that data, but I think there's other variables at play.
Sure.
You know, there's outside variables, how's the economy doing, you know, et cetera, right? It's just all sorts of these different things. Have you previously lost? Are you providing concessions to the voter after this loss? Are you, what percentage of Democrats are going to show up? How many younger voters are going to show up? So there's a ton of data that drives this. I think most importantly is, what do the demographics of the electorate look like? 26 years of doing that, that's what I care most about. If I work in the state of Wyoming, and I say that it's 85% Republican, right? I get there, I think, oh my gosh, it's gonna be tough. But when I go through this planning process, they oftentimes pass. A lot.
Downstate Illinois would look different than upstate. The demographic
Exactly.
is very different. So there would be numbers attached to that. I'm curious as to what that would look like. And then again,
Pay the fee. Find out.
No, I think that, so in the case of, let's say, Maine 207, so they tested 195 and 135, okay, in their poll, and we split the sample. Well, you can't do a poll, right, but we were able to do a poll there because they have enough voters to do it.
Right.
And the support level for the 195 was 58%. So 56 to 58% is kind of our threshold. If we get to that, then we feel comfortable if they run a great campaign, they could potentially pass this, okay? The 135 was like 66% or something support. And it was like, you can still do a campaign, but it's pretty strong that it's going to pass. So they have decided to do the 195, I believe. And so, you know, they're going to have to run a great campaign. So we're not going to get that really tight data, you know, with a mail survey.
Sure.
But I've done it enough that I can read the tea leaves after 26 years of doing mail surveys, including Illinois, to figure out if you have a chance or not. And if not, what is it that we have to modify?
Not to continue this further than we should, but given the, have you seen other districts, I'm sure you have, but just a question, that have such a small sampling of voters, in other words, student families versus a larger community that is not necessarily attached to the school in any way, and maybe has never been, and maybe hasn't been for a long time. You see that in other districts as well, or do you see, we don't have a lot of kids in our, those voters that you're talking about, not a lot of them are attached to the school in any way.
Yeah, so I've never seen a crazier boundary ever, right? And it's like, wow, this is really little. I mean, you start looking at it, right? And I thought the same thing. What percentage truly have kids in the home, right? It's typically about 30%. But we can, I have data that shows me model as parent, or definitely a parent, right? I have that data, but I don't know, we'd have to look at it. But you're right, if it's a really small percentage of parents that benefit from this, then that's a problem. So then we circle back and say, the bottom line is that Illinois voters are reasonable. I know you don't think they are sometimes, right? But most are reasonable. And they want to do the right thing, especially when it comes to kids, and when it comes to education, and when it comes to doing right for their community.